Hey everybody, so I just finished getting S rank with this build, so now it's time to make an updated build video from my last melee build. I did make some tweaks to it. You'll probably notice the missiles. If you haven't watched the stream, then that's going to be the most obvious change here. So that video already talks a lot about the various combos that go into this build. I'm not going to go too into depth and demonstrate everything just because it's already been seen, but maybe just really quickly, I'll show the basic one, which is to initiate with Pulse Blade, Zimmerman, and missiles if needed, although most builds won't, and then only the heavier ones, and then switch to Slicer, counter their armor with Assault Armor, and then go back to the Pulse Blade. So if they pop the armor, I pop mine. QB cancel, Zimmerman if they're super stable build that's like over 2000. Otherwise they'll just get instantly stunned again. And then you just do the Pulse Blade Light Slash if it's a fast mech, or you can get away with the charge when you feel like you need the mini stun and the damage, and you want to try to take a bit more of a risky 50-50, but you'll get a lot more damage than that one Light Slash. And yeah, that's the basic combo. They're let's get rid of these guys here. Okay. So yeah, you can also use the light slashes against much lighter mechs like double Vientos, although I usually only use one slash while I'm trying to build up the stagger, unless I'm triggering the stagger with the light slash, and then I do the second as a follow-up into Zimmerman Slicer. Something else that I've also adapted into the build a lot more that I wasn't doing originally is purging gear. So if you've watched the stream, you'll see there's a lot of different mechs that are super fast. The lamb legs, missile kites, a lot of them can reach almost 400 speed or at 400 if it's the lambs. And you have to make a decision against certain builds about what you want to purge. So the slicer is really only needed for extremely tanky enemies because you have an alternate punish that you can just go do the light slash, the Zimmerman, weapon swap anyways, and just stagger extend with punches. And you'll notice the pulse blades off or up after the third punch, which is how much you can get. So you can go back into a Zimmerman slicer or just the plain old slicer if you want to be a little bit quicker and give up a little bit of damage. For the enemies that are really good at staying close to you and kiting, the ACT missiles here may not do anything, and so we may have to ditch these instead, and then just keep the slicer for just a massive punish. Anyways, that'll delete them if they don't pop their armor. It's a little easier than the punches because the thrust trajectory is better. So it is better to have the slicer if you can afford it, but you don't need it. In which case, if the missiles are doing some work, it's better to keep the missiles and ditch the slicer. But we're getting a massive bump up in EN efficiency if we purge gear. So this is the regular stats. If I remove either of these, you'll see that I get a massive lift here. So 51 if I ditch the missiles, if I ditch the slicer, 47, they're both fine. And then for extremely fast enemies that'll be extremely fragile, you can actually ditch both because you'll get a lot more speed that way. Like over 300 is your passive boost speed, and your AB speed will also go up a lot. Let's take a look at that really quick and see how fast I get going here. So normally I'm 345, 46. I did both. I get up to about 350. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but again, you'll notice it because you're often fighting for inches, and more importantly, when you're not boosting, you're still moving closer to them a lot faster at 305 instead of 289. So that's purging gear is going to become an essential tactical decision. Basically anybody that's backpedaling extremely fast is who you want to do this with, and then make sure that you don't commit to the punish, like the pulse blade punish, unless you have like recently refilled your batteries. So get them close to stagger, but just poke them with the Zimmerman. At about 100 meters is where you can just tickle them with it enough to prevent the impact from regenerating. Pop them with that, drop down to the ground really quick, and then you should have your EN back extremely fast. I'll just give an example here. Well, hold on, maybe burn off more, so you can see. It would be like chasing them. Let's say he's almost staggered. I'm not going to do it right now because I'm too low. Get my energy back, and then I'm going to go in for the committal Zimmerman to stagger, into Pulse Blade, into stagger, extend, punch, and then finally Pulse Blade again if I need it, but more often they'll be dead by that point. The pulse, like even one Pulse Blade punish is enough to really mess up those super fragile fighters. Another enemy type that's going to give us a lot of trouble is the heavy biped coral rifle and nebula swaps. So those guys are extremely tanky, and so we need the missiles in order to actually to actually stun them. We won't be able to get it with just the Zimmerman Pulse Blade. So either we got to soften them up with a Zimmerman shot before doing the Pulse Blade Zimmerman, or we got to land a missile. But the problem is that they do so much damage in a short order, and those track really well. And so it's often a race there. You really got to pick your moment to go in because you're going to eat a lot of damage every time you attempt. I think what I've been doing more now is just letting them bleed off more battery so that they can't afford to be so evasive, and just commit once they try to drop towards the ground. And that's my moment to try to like land the missiles and the pulse blade into Zimmerman, and then get my punish, counter armor, and then punish again. A couple skill sets that you're going to need to get really good at if you're going to use this build are weapon swapping appropriately. So I'm just going to pick a random opponent here, but you want to get really good at backing up after you land the pulse blade a little bit before you shoot the Zimmerman to avoid point blanking them, which is when the gun clips through them. So make it a habit that once you land the pulse blade that you start backing up either through a QB or just passively. Both are fine, but I feel like the QB is probably a little bit better because you're canceling your animation canceling. So I'm gonna fire the missiles here. So I'm gonna do the pulse blade, swap weapon first, then do the Zimmerman, rather than the other way around. So yeah, land a big combo that way. But yeah, make sure you start the weapon swap animation before you go in for the slicer. And the other thing too is the slicer has a much slower melee thrust than the other melee options that are very popular. And so for that reason, you actually want to use either an AB or a QB before you start the slicer animation so that you've got some momentum preservation. It'll bring you closer to the target and basically speed up the melee thrust animation a lot. And the slicer is not the fastest, and you can miss a lot, especially with latency issues. So you'll often need to do it on prediction, which means that you assume that your Zimmerman's going to stagger them, and you start the weapon swap Zimmerman melee thrust without confirming that they're going to get staggered. You can always interrupt it with another QB and cancel. So even if you whiffed it, it's not the end of the world as long as you got enough energy to afford canceling and trying again. So yeah, weapon swapping is a huge skill set. Knowing which weapons to purge is going to be a huge skill set, depending on the types of enemies that you're fighting. And then the matchups that are very tough, double Vientos. Because I've swapped off the Javelin, we've had to make a half compromise. The Javelin's better against Vientos because they stay close and in sort of the arc of the missile, and so you only need to land like 1 or 2 Zimmermans, whereas now it's more like I got to land 3 or 1 or 2 plus a pulse blade thrust. So we're a little less efficient against those double Viento and double stun gun users, but we're just going to purge the missiles and the slicer against those to get extremely fast DNs. We spend very little downtime taking Viento clips. Another little skill that you could do is to try to make it so that you drop to the ground after they've used half their magazine. So like if you hear them fire like 2 shots, that's a perfect time to do the EN recharge, because at most they're going to get 3 more shots on you, but you'll get all your energy back. And I've also had to learn this the hard way too. You really got to use the light thrusts. The heavy thrust is not going to work against skilled players, especially in S rank. They're going to be able to dodge it with the Alula unless you catch them with their batteries low. Which is a great skill to also manage, by the way, which is knowing when melee thrusts are viable. So this is not the same type of build as like an ultra lightweight melee. You don't melee cancel it extensively. What you're instead trying to do is make them dodge and burn off a lot of energy by using your Zimmerman and missiles to, rapidly start to build up impact against these fragile builds, while your tanky chassis can take a lot more, especially in AB with the impact reduction. So, 1850 with 30% reduction. Let me just do the math really quick. That's divide by 0.70. That's like having 2640 impact stability, so, or altitude or attitude stability, I mean. So you need to leverage both. If you finish off an opponent without ever having any impact built up, great, but it does question your strategy. This build mostly uses AB thrust to create psychological pressure and make the opponent burn energy before I go in for the melee thrusts. And knowing how much battery these builds can often get away with, like how many dodges they can do, is another strong skill set too. So with the Alula and the Santai, they're looking probably around 7 dodges before they're getting into dangerous territory. Not enough energy anymore, especially if they're hovering vertically and spending some that way. So you really need to, instead of just melee thrusting to create pressure, use your shotgun to create an AB pressure and then default to the melee thrust once you know you've got a high likelihood of them being close to or nearly out of battery. And then you can race them. You can actually do 1 or 2 melee cancels and seeing every time they dodge, realizing that they're running out of battery and they're probably going to catch the third one, if anything. One other remark on melee thrusting too that I don't see a lot of people do is prediction thrusting QBs over your head. So one of the best ways to fight double melee builds, especially ones that use the pulse blade or other melee thrusts that are similar, is to QB over top of them, and that'll cause your AB to cancel, which also takes away your impact reduction, and you have to reinitiate either an AB thrust or something else. You can do two things. You can either spam dodge to the side to turn it, instead of a revert like a flip 180, it'll turn it into an orbit. You won't break your AB. It's a little energy intensive, but it is a way to create the pressure with the Zimmerman. And if you already have an impact lead, like if you landed your first one really well or landed a missile, that's great. You've got extra energy anyways. You don't need to land much more before they're staggered. There is another strategy though, which is to do prediction melee thrusts. So when you want to try to psychologically get a read on at what distance they tend to QB over you, or do they do it right after your Zimmerman or right as you Zimmerman. So what you're going to do in those cases is trigger the thrust as you predict they're going to initiate their QB dodge. You can't do it on reaction. It has to be on prediction. But if you do that, your melee thrust won't start until they're over top and past you, and it will lunge in the correct direction to intercept them, and their QB will still be on cooldown. So you'll see this a lot. Like I'm getting quite comfortable now at doing these prediction thrusts in my stream, but you'll see like I won't even see them on my camera. I'll just see them dodge over me, but my melee thrust initiates anyways, and goes backwards towards the camera, and I just pop the Zimmerman while backing up. Without even seeing them, but when my camera reorientates, you'll see they're staggered because they didn't have time to see the thrust coming in. Extremely skilled opponents know this trick, and they'll double dodge, and the way you counter that is just by doing the light melee thrust. It won't insta stagger them, it won't give you a mini stun, but it will reliably catch them as they go over. But again, this is the high risk, high reward of melee thrust, because every time you fail these things, you're not in impact reduction either. So if they're spamming vientos, then you're going to take a lot of impact build up if you fail the thrust. But that is the nature of the game when it comes to melee builds. You're doing high risk, high reward. Another type of build that can give you a lot of difficulty is the double Zimmermans, and that's because on their second Zimmerman, assuming they landed the first one perfectly, even with your impact reduction, the second one will still do enough impact to stagger you. Let me just double check that actually. I think I might have done the 600, but 360 times 2 times 0.7 is 504 plus 1200. Oh, never mind. You can survive 3 salvos as long as you impact reduce the first one. So how do we handle those? Well, it's a bit of a 50-50 because if they kick right after, then we have to be kicking, but that means we can't use our AB to get the impact reduction on the first salvo. What I tend to do is assume that they're going to not kick the first try and trade with them their double Zimmerman shot for my single Zimmerman, and then I go into a double light slash really quickly, which will stagger them, and if that's assuming they don't kick. If I do want to bet that they're going to kick, then I'm going to try to kick them and win the kick trade into my Zimmerman double light slash. They will get their double Zimmermans off, but the recovery after the kick should buy you enough time to do the Zimmerman double light slash. You could also try the heavy slash. It's got the mini stun, but you're trying to make the most of those windows when they're on reload. You don't want to let them get space and try again once they're off reload, because you're just losing the trades in that way. You're not going to outpace them. You could try the slicer trick like I did before. I have found that it's getting finicky with impact reduction. I'm not sure if it's the net code lately or what's going on, but I'm not getting that much impact reduction on the slicer. I feel like it's penetrating through, so I've stopped using that more so now, unless it's like impact over time. Sweet 16, same idea, except this one can insta stagger you if they land the both of them while you're not in AB. So what I'm usually going to do against this is eat the double sweet 16s, let them get the both off while I shoot them with the Zimmerman, but I won't get staggered because of my reduction. And they're either going to kick, which is fine. I usually eat it, and then I'm going to go into my charge pulse blade into Zimmerman follow up because I should have them staggered and secured their combo by then, and I'll impact regen as my slicer animation's going off. So I'll actually end up getting a lot of my bar back that way. But you need to make sure that you eat the Sweet 16 shot while you're ABing. If you do it without your AB, you're going to get staggered in one shot because it's like 2,000 stability required, I think, to survive that roughly. 50-50 here is, do they go for the kick first? And if they go for the kick first, you want to go for the kick, but it's a read that you got to make on the opponent. So leverage your Zimmerman's better range. And another trick you can do is AB towards them on the second match when they think that you're going to go right for them, and QB backwards. They'll double Sweet 16 and then Pulse Blade. Really dirty trick there. Another trick that I didn't mention in the build video is using dirty armors, as I call them, which is when you pop assault armor against terminal armor users early in the match in order to secure the slicer. That's really good for rushdown builds, Vientos, anything that just can't take a whole slicer without being basically dead. So that's for terminal armor users only, or if people are not using their pulse armor, you can instead pop the armor at the end of the slicer combo to get a little bit more damage again, or you can retain it if you lose the next trade. It's your call, but you should consider assault armor as viable against terminal armors as long as you get it off early in the match. You don't want to be waiting till the end because it's not going to do anything against their terminal armor. So if you're not getting a free punish with this early in the match, you're probably not using it well at all. The last thing it can be used for, though, is for doing 1 damage to missile kites and other builds that tend to space you really well, because it won't do much damage, but it has a really crazy range for that like last little tiny tick of damage that goes quite far. Talking about the Javelin here, you can still play my original build here with the Javelin. It does have a couple advantages. You can keep using it throughout the fight. If like once you've done your first missile engagement, you guys are like, close quarters fighting. This one still is useful upon the second launch, whereas the homing missiles are often less so, unless you're like backpedaling and creating space and letting them chase into you. But there's certain builds you just can't get away with that, i.e. like stun guns, etc. Vientos, you need to be ABing a lot. So this is a better build for those close range kites, but if you want to have the ability to one-shot tanks and to stagger via the fire the missiles at about 250 meters, AB towards them and kick, and then do the charged pulse blade, which will, all those mini staggers will give time for the homing missiles to impact, follow up with the Zimmerman, and you're doing over 2,800 impact, as long as you didn't let anything decay. So all these things need to hit at roughly a tight window. It's not that tight, like you won't have trouble doing it, it's just you need to know that you can't be like lagging on the Zimmerman, for example. But that will insta-stagger tanks. You'll then go into the slicer punish. They'll pop armor, you pop assault armor, and fly away. I've learned this the hard way as well. It's not worth trying to engage and re-stagger them, even though it looks like they're close, because they're not. You're not going to get it in one Zimmerman. So fly away, but poke them with the Zimmerman just to keep that accumulative impact there, and then reinitiate, and you should be able to do it with just a regular pulse blade at that point. So yeah, that's the reason I went with these missiles. They are not as good against some builds, but they're more better on average because I can always purge them and get energy efficiency in lieu of the Javelin missile, which also helps me against those kites. Headpieces, Kassar was specifically because it's the high stability, good scan, and most importantly, the system recovery is really good for stun guns. That's why I didn't go with the Mine Beta head, which I mentioned in my other video, which has better EN efficiency by quite a bit and better stability at the cost of some weight. But realistically, the thing I didn't like was the system recovery, so that's kind of why I chose this one. Everything else is just a little too heavy, so that's why we went with this. Core-wise, we've talked a lot about different build types. I know that the the Fermezza core here, it gets brought up a lot on my stream. It's because of that EN recharge delay. That it doesn't seem like a lot, but 1/10 of a second is quite a lot. It's like 16, like if you did the math there, 1/8 roughly. It's quite a lot of downtime. The EN supply gets hurt, but realistically we could fix that by just purging something against those types of builds that we need it. There's a good argument to use this. It does give you a lot of speed. It's just that EN recharge delay can really mess you up, and the booster efficiency isn't dramatic enough to really add like a whole extra boost in your bar, so that's kind of why I didn't worry too much about it. The loss in defenses and AP is also quite dramatic here. So again, we are a semi-trading build here, so we do want to be tanky as possible, as much so as we can get away with anyways before our speed gets too hampered. But that's also the reason for these legs, although I think there could be good arguments for some of these guys because the trade-off in health isn't that bad. Yeah, and I've been looking at these legs and these legs as well for the speed bump, but I just haven't really felt that I needed it, so I've been sticking this way. So yeah, that's basically the updates to the build and the reason for each decision. I think that covers all of the most complex builds, like heavy tanks, how to do the tank buster combo is what I'm calling it, which is the 2880 impact threshold. Vertical kites, like the vertical bipeds that are heavy, um, using the homing missiles liberally and wait and picking your moment to thrust once they've burned off enough battery to make QBing rapidly untenable. The double Zimmermans and double shotguns. Shields are very difficult as well, especially the PS shield because they get so many deploys. You're going to need to use your sword more and use the light slash more. A, it's less reactable, and B, it hits over a long. You can delay it to hit twice at a longer period, so you can hopefully squeak through the IG window. Just know that you're not going to get the stagger on the first initiation. It's just not going to happen. You are going to have to build them up twice. The javelin missile is also better for them, but you can make the homing do the same trick by just firing the missile and then kiting off to the side, or shooting it while they're up high or you're up high and there's a big height difference so that you can get the missile to hit at an angle the shield doesn't block with. But you're going to deal with that as well. Same with the coral shield, similar idea. You just have to expect to initiate more than once in order to build up the impact. But use the sword more. Don't just do the Zimmerman. You're wasting your offense. You're going to have to do 2 initiations anyways, so you might as well use all your weapons. Yeah, other than that, A-being towards your opponents is another common thing that I seem to see not being done on some folks that have used my build. It's the impact reduction I cannot overstate, as well as the psychological pressure. It's how you create opportunities to get your melee thrusts. And so if you're not doing it and you're just melee thrusting in to create pressure, you might as well switch to an ultra lightweight and just take more speed, because that's not how this build operates. So, like against super light, I'm gonna just create a lot of pressure by constantly being like this, and going in for the melee thrust once they don't have the opportunity anymore to QB because they spent all their energy. There was something else I was gonna add as well. Purge. Another idea that I didn't mention in some of my other matches is purging the slicer once you've had a successful initiation with it. So once you've done your mega combo against an enemy, there is no builds other than tanks that are going to be able to survive it again. So you might as well just ditch it. You're never going to need that slicer again unless it's a what are those tanks called? Just the heavy tank treads. Could be an argument maybe for some of the light tank treads to just run away, but again, purging gear to get that EN efficiency, make you much more aggressive, is something you need to be looking for opportunities to take advantage of. It's a huge energy buff, so you got to really ask yourself, am I ever going to need this laser again once I've done all that damage? Probably not against 90% of builds. So make yourself faster on the ground, like how little downtime you have getting your energy back. And then one more note, I guess maybe before I cut this part here. So Assault Armor is a skill. It's a hard-to-use expansion, but it is better for builds that are going for wombo combos. It cancels Pulse Armor, and positioning underneath an opponent, if you can, when they're up in the air, while you do your slicer from slightly underneath them, is the optimal strategy, because as they drop, you can pop your armor and they'll still be level with you and take the whole Assault Armor. It's not always viable. It's not always possible. You're fighting just to close the gap a lot of the times against those builds. Just be aware that that is the optimal strategy. And I would honestly practice this, like go against opponents like in custom matches, and just really practice having your finger at the ready, like on the 2 buttons you have binded to expansion, and just be ready to pop it as soon as you see an animation or flash that triggers it, because the threshold for this is very small, so you need to be on top of that. Okay, I think that covers all of the build types. Maybe I'll add some like difficult matchups here, and I'll add some color commentary over top and just talk about why I'm doing certain things. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look here at a non-meta build, but we need to look at what the strategy of the opponent is in order to adapt to it. So he's running double earshots and light machine guns, meaning he's got lots of really good impact over time and damage over time, so we need the fight to be over quickly. The earshots he's either going to initiate with and get a stun for the miniguns, or he's going to save them for a punish. But the point is, if we can slip those and then end the fight quickly, that's how we counter his intended strategy. So that's why I'm using a kick at the beginning, trying to interrupt. He's going to get the ear shots, I think, here, if I recall. no ear shots. He is quite heavy, so I did need the missiles. But that's okay because he ends up popping his armor a little prematurely, letting me use the whole slicer. Because I didn't actually get any hits with it, I knew it was not on cooldown yet, so that's why I didn't switch weapons. It's another really quick decision, judgment call you got to make, because a slicer is better than the pulse blade for punish, so you don't want to miss that opportunity. Round 2. If I could redo it, I would like to get the missiles early, so that's kind of why I'm backing up here, because he's heavy. I'm trying to burn off some of his energy by backpedaling, which also gives the missiles more time. You can see that was a much more clean initiation that time. The missiles did a lot of the extra work for me. He managed to get the ear shots, unfortunately, so I couldn't get my follow-up pulse blade, but again, that's not the end of the world. And we wrap that one up. Okay, so another common meta build, missile kites. Not the lamb legs though, however he's using the pulse blade as both a snap defensive tool. If I do close the gap, he can actually come out with the light slashes if I'm already close to the staggered, and he'll get the stagger triggered plus punish on the second slash. So because of the speed of this build, you'll notice I ditch all my gear. He's so fragile, I'm not going to need much. I just need like one pulse blade initiation and then stagger extend or armor, whatever. So we might as well take the speed and the energy here, but in this case particularly, we needed every little bit of speed we could get. Also, I'm not rushing to land the melee thrusts. I did whiff one right there, but you'll notice that I'm just more focused on getting the impact steadily building up with the Zimmerman here. It's creating windows for me to get a guaranteed melee thrust soon, or if he doesn't change up his strategy, he's going to get staggered. So you can see right there, I ended up getting one slash, but the strategy here is just be patient, hit them with the Zimmerman. They don't have much stability, and they are not expecting you to be able to keep up with them, so just keep poking them with the Zimmerman. Don't let the impact ever regen. I did miss a few opportunities to prediction melee thrust because he was going over me a lot. I ended up getting it there at the end, but I think that's probably the single most important skill I don't think is really understood in the community right now is prediction melee thrusts as kiters go over you. So if there's one major contribution other than just midweight melee or double melee builds in general, I think it's that. It's using that as a skill rather than double melee canceling nonstop. So I'm falling behind. If he slashes me right now with the sword, I am going to eat a pretty major amount of damage. I'm surprised he hasn't yet, but he ended up letting me get my impacts back. You can see how fast my energy is regenerating too, so like there's very little downtime here. As soon as I touch the ground, I'm basically able to keep him in the air because I'm always on the ground ready to thrust at him. I'm not doing a great job of dodging the missiles in this case. The melee thrust is faster, by the way, than your boost, and it's roughly the same amount of energy per meter covered. So sometimes if you just want to re-establish the distance, you can just use the light melee thrust for that alone. He really should be slashing me right now. I don't know why he isn't. Oh well. He's going to end up getting it here, I think, anyways, because I'm so fragile. Yeah, there we go. Not enough health. But main problem there, I just went for too many melee thrusts, and I have some bad habits. Despite knowing intellectually what I should be doing, sometimes I just don't listen. So what I'm trying to do here is chase him down, but don't get too much altitude. I want to be able to tap my feet on the ground, get my energy back, and just, more importantly, just get underneath him if I can. And then wait for the moment where he has to come down while I'm poking him with the Zimmerman. I'll get some altitude if I need to, but it's better to be below him than above him. Yeah, late on the prediction thrust there. I should just be poking with the Zimmerman here. I got a prediction thrust there. Again, just one slash is all that was needed, though. I don't need two. He's going to move away anyways. So yeah, super fragile builds. They don't have enough health to even handle like getting caught once with the pulse play. It doesn't even have to be a full punish, just like one slash and then double slash to get a punish, plus the Zimmerman and stagger extend. It's you don't need the slicer and the missile, so you're better off with the energy and speed. Okay, take a look at another match. Very difficult matchup. PS shields with double Zimmermans. This is a meta build, one of the top builds actually. And I would say that with these guys, your best bet is to race to get as much impact out as possible. So don't use the charge slash unless they just start forgetting their shield, but you have to assume in S rank they're smart. So this guy actually does leave a lot of openings with the shield, which ends up being his downfall. But using the light slash, the kicks, not too aggressively though, because kicks can be blocked. But trying to race to get the impact as quickly as possible. The pulse blade has a big PA modifier, so even though it will reduce a lot of impact, you get a huge multiplier that kind of offsets it. So you still end up getting like 500 impact if you do a double slash, I believe. And they parry it. Because it's 1400 regular, he's taking 20%, but then you get like a 2-point-something multiplier. Again, bleeding out energy to get my missiles. He's not shielding well enough, he should have parried that, but margin of error. Slim with shields. Another thing to be mindful of is that people with shields can parry your counter assault armor, which is really annoying. So it means that what's going to happen is if they parry it, you're both going to be with no impact, like no room for impact, but he's going to get the first shot off. So it's another high-tech skill. Another struggling build, double coil rifles and nebula. With these guys, it's a race to take them down as quickly as possible. So make the most of your missiles. Again, bleeding out the energy. Getting the kick is huge, by the way. And yeah, you just basically cannot afford to mess up your initiation against these builds. So notice I'm QB canceling a lot of my animations in order to speed up the or minimize the downtime. So like I'll QB after shooting my Zimmerman and getting my weapon swap off so that I can more quickly get the second melee slash out. I believe this guy killed me on this round, I can't remember. He's not going vertical, which is what he should be doing, to be honest. Again, really trying to preserve energy. Yeah, I just ended up eating the full combo there, so that ends up killing me. This build is tanky for a biped, but you're not that tanky, and nebulas and coral rifles do an insane amount of damage that bypasses resistances, so we've only got roughly 10,000 health, and I believe those do something like 1,700 when charged each. So you basically get one shot against these guys, and they have one shot too, so it's roughly it's an even matchup, I'd say. It just depends on how good you are at your initiation. He ends up letting the missile hit him, which is devastating though. I end up getting the ability to back off here and restart when he's at half health. So yeah, ate the missiles again. Staggered into slash there. The pulse blade is usually going to slip past the pulse armor, by the way, because it slashes so fast and pulse armor is slower than assault. So you often can get both slashes, then do the armor. But lastly, we'll look at another difficult matchup, which is just laser kites. So these guys move extremely fast. I underestimated him, and I only ditched one piece of gear here. I thought maybe I'd keep the missiles because he's a floating style, but you'll see that I end up realizing that I need every last bit of speed and energy to catch this build. This is where like literally meters matter. It doesn't seem like 5 meters faster or 10 meters faster, but there's a lot, but it is. So at first it looks like the missiles are helping a lot, but you never really see anything get accomplished with them other than just the pressure, and I really need that little bit of speed and energy. Again, it's kind of crutch to notice that you only need to secure one solid combo as a melee build against 99% of builds. So as your health is ticking down, as your impact is building up, it's okay to spend that. You should think of that as fuel, like you're trying to secure the combo by spending some health in order to close the gap, particularly against lasers because they're not really impact build up. So at this point I realized, okay, me going faster means me taking less damage because I'm going to close the gap faster. So I end up ditching both, and it pays off. So you can already see like just how it feels, how much closer I am already to him, and he's burning out energy there, so he's not able to QB enough to dodge the sword. There I kind of made a mistake. I went into the hill and it kept me in the air a little longer, so my battery slowed down. Didn't charge up. yeah, see, one pulse blade combo, if I had managed the punches, then I could have basically finished the fight, but even just the damage of getting the pulse blade attacks landing twice is devastating to these types of builds. I should really be going for prediction melee thrusts when at the very beginning, like right there, that's a perfect time. I know he's going to do it, so if I still have half my battery or more, then I'm primed to get a full combo if I successfully land it. And it will track vertically too, which is nice. To a point. Yeah, right now just poking with the Zimmerman, trying to create pressure. Impact, he's on a time limit now, he's basically dead if he doesn't change, if something doesn't change. I ended up messing up my weapon swap there. I didn't have the pulse blade out. That was my mistake, but it doesn't end up mattering because I'm able to close the gap. Yeah, swapped again, but nope. So yeah, my main mistakes against this guy were not using the prediction melee thrust tactic enough. It is the strongest counter, I think, to these like tactical counters, these types of builds. Okay, I want to show a really high level play kiter who ends up beating me here, and it really shows the strength of flying over double melee builds, and when that person, like namely me here, doesn't realize how I should be prediction melee trusting, he's able to. This is number 23, I think, on the leaderboards, but you can see how I let him fly past me quite a lot. I'm doing the orbiting strategy right now, but it's not getting me enough impact build up on him. I need to be winning the impact race. And it got close, but yeah, I used the charge melee thrust far too much. And I'm not securing enough impact build up. Lasers are racing your health while you race for the impact build up, so that's the game that we're playing. Especially a heavier sort of kiter like that build, the prediction melee thrust is even stronger because they don't move quite as far, don't move quite as fast. And their camera gets a little disorientated as well if you are really close to each other when you fly past each other. So I should not be melee thrusting here. I should be focusing on ABing. And honestly, I feel like the slicer I should have been ditching that as well. Okay, so that's a very technically skilled kiter. Okay, guys, I hope that build video update helps you out a lot. And I think that the hardest part about this build in summary is the fact that it is such a cerebral build. Like, you have to look at the enemy build and adapt your build and your playstyle before the fight starts, because you're playing a very high risk, high reward build where mistakes cost you the match. So it's going to require forecasting your opponent's initiation type, whether or not you have the priority. Like, is your initiation stronger than theirs and more likely to stagger break them first, or is it the other way around? In which case you have to play a more defensive style where you're trying to like slip one of their attacks first before you go in for your combo. And latency definitely is a big problem, not going to lie, but that's just how it is. If you want to do double melee builds, these are the realities. At least for midweight, it's much more important to be securing your combos because you're taking damage and impact buildup in order to secure your combo. But yeah, it's a really fun play style. The combo can delete pretty much everything but the strongest mechs in one initiation. But those tankier builds you're definitely going to need two, and just be aware that your assault armor is not going to insta stagger upon completion of canceling their pulse armor if they decide to pop that instead. So yeah, that's the build, and hope you guys enjoyed the stream climbing the S rank. If there's any questions, you're welcome to fire them in the comments, and I'll hopefully answer them for the record on this build. On this build video, and then we'll just have a library of answers for anyone else that's curious. Thanks so much.